Hi there, I'm Drew Badger, the world's #1 English fluency guide, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to another advanced listening practice lesson. Before we get into the lesson, I wanted to say thank you to you and everyone else out there watching to have helped us grow to 300,000 subscribers here on YouTube. I think that's really cool, and we're really working hard to get to 1 million. And as you've probably seen on the channel already, we try lots of different things, and so we're really trying to help a lot of different kinds of people out and figure out what's really most helpful for you. So continue to give us your feedback, what you've liked so far up to 300,000, and what you would like to see as we move to 1 million subscribers and more. So I really look forward to seeing that number and to helping more people achieve fluency. Anyway, let's get into today's lesson. Well, it's been a pretty not so great week as far as the weather is concerned. So as far as, meaning concerning, as far as the weather is concerned, it's been really rainy. There's been some flood warnings and flooding in some places here in Japan. Actually, for the past maybe month or so, we're in the rainy season in Japan right now. If you are not living in Japan and thinking about coming here, I do not recommend you come during the rainy season. It's not very fun. Usually the spring and the summer, or actually I should say the spring and the fall are the two best seasons to come out here because it's really nice weather, but really it's only for about 2 weeks when people are not complaining about it being too hot or too cold. So I recommend the spring and the fall if you feel like coming out to Japan, but it's a great country and I highly recommend you come check it out. Anyway, talking about Japan today, even though it was raining, I went out with my wife. She was really excited to go see a woman named Natsuko Toda, who I'd actually never heard of, but I've seen some of her work before. And she is a woman who does subtitles for movies, for American movies or other foreign films. I don't know about if it's only American movies, but she does the subtitles for those movies for Japanese viewers of movies at the movie theater. And it's really interesting to not only learn a little bit about how subtitles are made and the way you make them, and we can talk about that, or I will explain a little bit about that in this video. But the important thing, the interesting thing was actually her story about how she got into it in the first place. So this was actually a speech given at Hostinbos. It's a it's almost like a theme park, but it's a place designed for maybe many years ago. Actually, it used to be more of a Holland, because maybe like the Dutch colonists came to Japan many years ago into Nagasaki. So Nagasaki was the only port where foreigners were allowed, and the Dutch were one of the groups of people that came here, and so they made kind of a Dutch town. And now I don't know if there's any actual real history or anything having to do with that area, but it's a place not that far from where I am in Nagasaki City, and they have anyway just lots of interesting stuff. Now that's a whole other interesting story about that, just the business itself of it. So it used to be like really Holland stuff, and they would have tulip festivals and things. I think they still do that, but now they've got all kinds of other things that they're marketing in there and trying to get more people to come to the park. Anyway, so this woman Toda-san, she was at I think she was at Hostinbos, but she was delivering a speech to a whole bunch of high school and I think college and anybody else who wanted to come, but just students there. But that was broadcast to other places around, so where we were, I think maybe where we were and maybe 1 or 2 other places as well. So we were actually watching it just at a local university, and it was on a big screen, and so my wife was excited to go there and watch that just because my wife likes, English movies and things English, and it was just interesting to see about this woman because she was talking about how you can follow your passion. And this is something particularly keen, especially for young people here in Japan, because Japan is typically a place where maybe you have dreams when you're young, but then you decide to not go into those things because maybe you just want to have a regular job or something like that when you get older. And she actually talked about this in the speech. So when she began, the very first thing she said when she was talking, and this was all a speech in Japanese, but the very first thing she said when she was talking was, I didn't get into this stuff because I like English. I actually hated English and learning English when I first got started. Back when I was younger, the thing that got me interested in pursuing English was the fact that I liked movies. And you'll see this in, most people that become fluent. If you have like personal friends that are fluent, or even myself as an example, I became fluent in Japanese because I got interested in the culture, not by wanting to learn the language, but by wanting to learn the language because of studying gardening. So the language was a vehicle to get to the actual thing that I wanted, which was learning to study gardening in Japan. And so it was the same thing with this woman, and her story is actually paralleling, to be parallel like this, to have like a connection, not being connected. This is a physical thing from mathematics where you've got two lines that are next to each other like this, but they never cross each other, they never touch. So when you talk about people having parallel ideas or parallel lives, this just means that you've got two things that are very similar. They've got a lot in common. So her story is a lot like mine, but she had to wait a really, really long time in order for her to achieve her dream. So back when, maybe she was 20 years old, she was just getting out of college, and she really thought, and this is another really interesting thing that you should think about, one of my pieces of advice as well, is whatever it is you happen to be doing or want to be doing in your life, all you have to really think about, even if you don't know how you're going to do something, is you put the inputs in there. You think about the inputs. And in her case, the inputs were, I want to do something with English because I like English movies and I like movies. So what can I do there? I can combine these two things, and the subtitles, creating that for movies sounds like a really interesting job, and there must be somebody that does that. So she went into the history about this and talking about how people were creating those subtitles, and it was a group of like 10 Japanese men. These are typically professors, and it was really hard for her to get into that, and it took her 20 years from graduating college before she could actually really do that as a full-time thing. So she worked for, I think, an insurance company or something like that for maybe a year and then decided not to do that anymore. But her full story was talking about how she was able to get into a movie production company or something related to movies. And then when she was just doing that, she was working, maybe doing secretary things, and so if people needed anything translated, that would be the person that they would give things to. But as foreign movies started becoming more popular and the economy was coming back after the war in Japan, then more people were starting to produce movies and then actually bring the actors over to America, or from America over to Japan, I should say. And so when she was, given the task of, hey, can you also do maybe some actual translating, not just typing things, but do some translating for people when they come over here, she started meeting movie stars and other people like famous directors. And she even gave a story about Francis Ford Coppola, the director of The Godfather, and how he came out and, they were doing some shooting in the Philippines and he was traveling through Japan, and he wanted her specifically to do subtitles for, a movie he was working on. So because of that, the Japanese company couldn't really say no to that, so they decided, okay, we're going to let her do it. Now, an interesting thing about subtitles, and that's how she got her start and, being able to do subtitles after that. But if you really think about it, she was explaining, because a student had asked her, well, isn't it problematic, isn't it troublesome that you have like all of these words that people are speaking, but you're really trying to condense that down into a very brief phrase, even just a couple of characters? And she even talked about words like the names of cities like San Francisco or Constantinople. So these are names of places that are even too long. Then you can't even have that whole thing as a subtitle, because you can really only have 10 characters as a thing for a subtitle. And so you have to be very quick when one character says something and you deliver those subtitles, and then one character says something else and then you deliver those subtitles as well. So you have to be really quick. And so yes, you do lose a lot in the translation, because translating movies is something that's just much more different than translating a book, because you can't get into the details of something and really say the whole exact thing that people are trying to say. So it's a very different industry. And I'd never really thought about it, because I watch sometimes foreign movies, but I'm looking at the subtitles, and I definitely notice now if I go to a movie, like I went to the new Independence Day Resurgence movie, which I highly recommend. That was a lot of fun. I was going into the movie, I'd heard a few reviews about it that were saying, it's not such a good movie, but I actually really enjoyed it. So I watched it with a couple of Japanese people, and we were talking about the subtitles after that, because now I can, read the Japanese, and I'm looking at the English and reading that, and I'm thinking that's not what they said. It's not even kind of close to what they said. But, just so people can get the idea of something, but you really lose a lot in translation. So this is the idea of having something being created as one thing, but then when you move it to something else, you lose something in the translation. So this is the physical idea or the origin of that phrase, but when you want to talk about, maybe I explain something to my son and he doesn't listen to me, and like I can explain to my other friend, well, I was talking to my son about like you need to do this and that, but maybe the message got lost in translation. So when I said it and it went into my son's ear, he heard it a little bit differently or thought about it differently, something like that. So the idea, again, taking a physical origin from translating subtitles or translating something literally from one language to another, you can talk about that when you're just transmitting messages of any kind from one person to another, to say something was lost in translation. So we talked about, after we had seen Independence Day, talking about how we couldn't, it was actually quite funny that a lot of the subtitles were not really matching up to what was being said by the native speakers. And so this is one of those things where I'm trying to push for people to learn English because I understand what it's like to not be able to understand a movie. I know what it's like to watch a movie and be thinking like, what did they just say? And you feel like even though they said something and maybe you understand a little bit of the language, you're almost it almost makes it worse because they're showing you something that's not quite correct, and you understand like, yes, he said something and it was probably that idea, but you're really losing a lot as far as wanting to learn the language. If you just want to know what happens in the story, like that guy went to this city or he picked up this thing, and maybe you don't care about the idioms and the phrases and other things like that, it doesn't really matter. But if you're really trying to learn the language through something like that, it's much better to actually use English subtitles when you're watching an English movie as opposed to using subtitles in your native language. So really that's the step that you should take before trying to watch a movie without subtitles. So maybe you would begin watching movies with subtitles in your native language that are English movies, and then you switch to English subtitles so you can read what's happening at the bottom of the screen while you're saying things in movies, and that will slow things down a little bit for you because you'll be able to read it. And then after that, you can go on to just watching movies without having any subtitles in them at all. Anyway, it was a really fun experience, and it really goes to show it was really an interesting thing, and it gave the great message that if you really have something that you're passionate about, you will figure out a way to do it. So I've talked about this before. It was, when I was talking about, I think, quite a few videos ago, I was talking about the first and second rules of fluency. So the most important thing really is to pick a particular destination and then to not really worry about how you're going to do that thing. You just worry about what you want. And if you keep stumbling forward, you keep trying to make progress towards that thing, you eventually will figure out a way to do it. And so you see us doing that right here on the YouTube channel. So we're kind of stumbling forward. We're continuing to make progress every week. I want to release new videos where we try new things, experiment with new things, and whatever you like really let us know. Let us know what you like, and let us know what you don't like as well. Because, we hate to make more things that people don't like. But, if we can help people, then that's our job, and we're doing it well, we think. Anyway, so when you're thinking about especially her situation where she had to take a really long time before she finally reached her goal, hopefully that gives you some motivation yourself when you're thinking not only just about learning English, but about anything else that you're trying to do where you're starting one place, you have a goal, it might even be a big goal, or you have no idea how it's going to happen. But if you think it's possible and you have an idea that somebody is doing it, like in her case, like she looked and saw that somebody in fact was writing subtitles, but it was just difficult for her, especially a Japanese woman back in that time, to get into an industry that basically all men were doing. So there were a lot of things that stopped her from doing it, but nothing ultimately stopped her from pursuing her goal. And even though it took her 20 years before graduating, or from graduation to when she could finally pursue that thing professionally, she was able to do that. So the advice she was really giving to people, she was like, think about what you want, and especially with English learning, to connect the interest that you have with your English. Because, if you just try to go after the language itself, unless you're a linguist, you're really not going to have much success with it. The other thing she said, because she had received a question about this just from young people, was like, how do we get smarter? How do we develop our minds? That kind of thing. And she said, read. Read, read, read. People everywhere, you walk around and everybody's on their phone like this. but nobody's reading. People don't really read books so much anymore. And the actual act of reading and writing especially, but reading in particular is one of those things that's how we see examples of things, and it really slows down the language. So you get to read something and see, okay, that's how that sentence is made, and I can get a lot of good examples from that, and I practice writing it as well. And so that's why, it's the same thing you did when you were getting fluent in your native language. But again, if you want to get fluent in English, you have to, again, have something you're passionate about that you can connect English with, do a lot of reading, a lot of actually using the language in conversations, and that's what's going to help you get fluent. Anyway, this has been our another advanced listening practice lesson. I hope you have enjoyed it. Hopefully I'm not speaking too fast. I bet there are some people that want me to speak even faster, and I will try to do that. Hopefully I can figure out some other things to talk about. It's funny, I can't speak too quickly or I don't know what I'm going to say next. So I have to think about that as well. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, do click that like button, share this video with a whole bunch of people that you also think might be interested in improving their English as well and want to have something a little bit faster to listen to. And if you'd like transcripts for this series, you can find them by clicking on the link that I had earlier in this video or in the description below this video. And if you're not a subscriber, do become a subscriber and be ready for the next video when it comes out very soon. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Did you know that most English learners have just one major fluency frustration that stops them from enjoying conversations and becoming a successful speaker? For you, it might be your accent, or that you hesitate to think and translate in your head before you speak. Whatever your biggest learning frustration may be, we've prepared specific advice just for your situation to help you finally reach your English learning goals. Click on the link in the upper right of this video to turn your biggest learning weakness into a strength and start getting fluent 2, 3, or even 10 times faster.